sourdough tortillas and venison chili. Simple foods, yes, but in our modern world, our same basic ingredients don't match. Our flour is different, our fats are different, and our meats too. So let's go back to their ingredients, to their flavors, and taste a real 1800s meal. Talk about a classic food of the Western frontier. I mean, this is what people ate. Some sort of sourdough flatbread, meat, vegetables, with any spices you could get. That's a taste of the West. The ingredients today are very unique. The tortillas themselves are easy to make, but what's going to set them over the top is the backstory of the ingredients. Same with today's chili, simple foods that people lived off on the frontier. Let's kick off with the tortillas. They have the barest of ingredients: flour, water, salt, and yeast, plus one magic ingredient. An ingredient everyone used to eat. It smells good. It has just a mild, it's barely even a smell at all. That's lard, specifically leaf lard, which is very pure and not so easy to find these days. Talk about an ingredient time forgot. This lard was a gift from a family friend, Don and his wife Nikki. Rendered fats like this are shelf stable, and as we're increasingly learning, they're easier for our bodies to digest than modern alternatives. So a tablespoon of lard is for texture, and a tablespoon of butter is for flavor. We have 1.5 cups of flour, a teaspoon and a quarter or so of salt, a little more rather than less helps, and then come the wet ingredients. 1/2 cup of sourdough starter and 1/3 cup or so of water. I fed the starter this morning to get it bubbly and active, but even a sourdough discard will do just fine. The sourdough starter here is mainly to add flavor. That subtle sourness and taste of history is what we're after. The exact amounts in this recipe are less important than the overall texture. It's not a fiddly sort of bread. This just needs to come together and be dry enough that we can mix it with our hands, but still have good moisture in it. So I bring it together here in the mixing bowl, cleaning up the edges as I go, and cleaning up my hands too, so that I have less to wash when all is said and done. After all, doing dishes out here is no small chore. It's hauling water, heating it on the wood stove, and then washing everything by hand. Plus a final toss of the dishwater out the front door. I mean, this is pretty old school stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna knead that dough for about 2 minutes. I just want it to start to develop a different feel. This is gonna make 10 to 12 tortillas, so I cut it up into chunks and twist those into roll-sized spheres, and those go up on top of the warming oven on the cook stove. This spot has just enough warmth to make them relax and rise over the next 30 minutes or so. In an old cabin, being next to the metal chimney makes for the perfect environment for this. And there you go, that's it. It's just a short wait now. But we can't stop and call these 1800s tortillas just because we added lard. No. You may have noticed that I used 2 kinds of flour here. One pretty all-purpose, but the other is straight out of times long forgotten. Now it's not as primitive as einkorn, but it's not as highly bred as modern wheat varieties. In other words, its nutty, almost cinnamon flavor is the flour people knew in the 1800s. If you go to the store today and buy generic flour, it won't be much like the flour of the 1800s. So we drove 400 miles this week to get authentic wheat, a heritage variety called Rouge de Bordeaux. Now, I didn't come up with this idea myself. A friend of the channel left comments on lots of our videos, and we started up a chat, and before I knew it, Robbie and I were driving to North Dakota to visit our new friend Mark on his farm, where he grows heritage red wheat.
There might be... See, here's what I had trouble that corn on the break up, and then you get a little...
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
But otherwise, that's about it.
This flour was the pride and joy of French bakeries for 150 years, all throughout the 1800s. Its lineage dates back to Roman times. It was preserved by the monks and eventually fine-tuned into a heritage wheat flour we call Rouge de Bordeaux. Now, Mark told us the story of how he started growing this for his family because it's said to be easier to digest and less mess with genetically than our modern varieties. Not to mention, it has so much more flavor. So we met him at his farm, we loaded up a tote of seed, and the plan for all this? Well, we'll mill and we'll bake some of it, like we're gonna do today. But nearly all of it is gonna go into the ground on the ranch, with hopes of having a good crop of heritage wheat come this fall. Maybe we can supply some to our local community, maybe we can mill it for our own use. I mean, the wheels are definitely turning on this one. So the Rouge de Bordeaux tortillas are resting above the cookstove. Let's dive into the venison chili. Now, the way I grew up, in my family, my dad always made the chili. And he was a connoisseur about it. So it was never ground beef chili, it was steak chili. And he would roast the peppers, and it would have to cook all day long, and then you weren't allowed to eat it. You had to let it sit even longer, and the next day we would get to eat the chili. So chili's one of those things, boy, you can master it, and it can get better and better and better. But when you're hungry out on the prairie, something like a ground venison chili thrown together with whatever beans and canned jalapenos and chilies you have, that's gonna do the trick today. So the recipe for today's chili is from a great Montana hunter who, like Mark, the heritage wheat farmer, is a friend of the channel. Frank brought me his cookbook, which he wrote himself, and I'm adapting his buffalo chili recipe today to go with venison. So we start with our pound of meat, and then we add a chopped onion. This one's been kicking about in the root cellar a little bit too long, but hey, this is spring after all. We go with kidney beans, a can of crushed tomatoes, and I'm tossing in some pinto beans too, and then I'm upping the ante with some serious heat. And for me, I say the spicier the better. So I'm hoping those jalapenos are gonna add just the kick I need, because I can feel this cold coming on, and this is nature's remedy. A nice hearty chili with spice. But before I added all those heaps of ingredients, I browned the meat well in a couple tablespoons of that classic lard. Okay, my goal here is to get this venison browned, and I'm browning it with some lard because my friends Pat and Katie got this deer. They fill their freezer with wild game, and that's how a lot of Montanans eat out here. But this is pure 100% ground venison, so there's nothing added to it. No pork fat, nothing that's gonna give you any extra fat. So when I'm browning it and when I'm gonna use it in this chili, I'm adding in a little bit of fat just to help that come together, because venison is a really lean meat. So that touch of lard helps. Okay, I almost forgot all my spices. So we have, basically it's a bunch of chili powder, and just a few other things. I had a little bit of sage kicking around, and so I loaded them all up into here. That smells good. Woo-hoo-hoo. Of course, with all great chili, it gets better with time. So the longer that I let this sit and just simmer on the cook stove, the better it's gonna be. That is a good, hearty Montana chili. But as we get close to the finish line here, those tortillas will be ready to stretch and roll and go onto a hot griddle just in time for dinner. But there's no hot griddle unless I put my boots on and I go outside to do one critical job. So unfortunately, it's been so muddy, I haven't been able to bring out a load of our really good big chunks of pine, but I've got lots of little scraps and bits left over from the renovation that I'm kind of living off of out here, but I still have to split them. So while that chili is simmering down and before the tortillas get going, I'm gonna go outside, throw my muck boots on, and let's chop some more wood. Using old wood scraps isn't the most glamorous way to do it, but I guarantee you back in history, if people had wood like this, they used it. Have I cut my hands doing this? Yes, I have. But that kindling has to be split really fine.
Well, I'll tell you what, it feels like spring out here. I've heard a kestrel hunting from above. I've heard sandhill cranes today. Every marmot and gopher is awake and they are out and talking to each other. I bet it's in the 60s right now. It just feels incredible. But whether it's cold or it's warm, that cook stove has to be kept going. And that's where wood like this comes in handy. It may not be the most beautiful stuff in the world, but sometimes having smaller pieces like this, it lets me regulate the temperature of that stove so it's not just blazing hot all the time. I can kind of let it die down, and then when I need it, like when we're about to do these tortillas, when I really need it, I put a bunch of these on, I blow on the coals, I get that fire going again, and I can get just my griddle really hot without getting the whole cook stove roaring for 4 hours. And of course, with wood like this, you have your medium-sized pieces, your bigger pieces, and then your thin kindling. And this is the stuff that it takes to get the fire going. Ow. Today it was tricky getting that stove going. It was dead calm out, and boy, that stove just didn't wanna catch. But had I had more tiny, splintery, dry pieces, I think it would have gone a little better. I was pushing it with some of the bigger stuff. But people sometimes ask, you know, how do you regulate the temperature? And this is the answer right here. It's based on the size and the type and the dryness of the wood you're using. How often you put it on and how often you let it die back. It's all a bit of a dance. No real way to explain it except by feel.
Okay, so I'm headed to our wall of old and new tools. We need to get a good heavy cast iron griddle or even a skillet for these tortillas. This is an instance where I don't think it's possible to have your iron too hot. This griddle wants to be really hot. The tortillas are only going to cook maybe 60 seconds total with a flip halfway, so the hotter the better. And when we roll the dough out, the thinner the better too. But while I'm getting out tools, I'm climbing up here to show you guys some old glass jars that I stumbled onto. Anyone know the rough dates of these things? I pulled them out of an antique store in Great Falls, cleaned them up, and I should use them to store my dry ingredients. I mean, I wouldn't can in them anymore, they're probably too fragile for that. But this Rouge de Bordeaux flour would actually look really lovely in them. Back to the sourdough though. These had half an hour on the warming oven of the stove, so they aren't really gonna rise. I mean, sourdough takes a long time to rise, but what that time did was relax the dough so that this next part goes smoothly. You can see the flecks of the whole wheat flour that Mark milled for us with his stone mill. Now, I used about 1/3 whole wheat flour to 2/3 all-purpose Montana white flour in this recipe. The whole wheat adds the flavor, but the white wheat makes a lighter tortilla, both in color and density. Okay, this griddle is ripping hot. Let's get the first tortilla on. Now, usually the first one is a bit light, but after a few you start to get a hot griddle and you see those beautiful dark bubbles on the dough, which really up the flavor, and they give you that slight crisp crunch on the thin outer layer. I just do these one at a time, focusing on what I'm doing so that I don't let them burn. This cannot be bought from a store. It comes only from a flash of heat and cast iron. A quick flip, and you can see the tortillas puff a bit as that lard and sourdough steam and create air pockets. Then it's off the heat and into the old tin pan. That venison chili has been simmering for a couple of hours on the cook stove, so the flavors should all be coming together now. But there's only one way to find that out.
We need a chili spoon. I'm a big believer, chili should be eaten with a wooden spoon. I don't know what it is, but it gives it a different flavor. If you've never tried it, try it.
If you're on the hunt for the perfect wooden spoon, we have a few in our store that are handcrafted by my good friend Susan Gellner in her Montana studio. Some are chokecherry wood or other locally harvested woods. The link is in the description.
Oh my goodness, you guys, this is good. This has a ton of flavor. Oh, the tortilla really makes it special. It's a good combination, kind of a thin flatbread like this. That goes really well with the chili. I grew up always having sourdough bread with our chili. Some people have crackers. It's kind of how you grew up. But that sourdough flavor with the heat of the chili, there is something so right about that. And talk about a classic food of the Western frontier. I mean, this is what people ate. Some version of this. Maybe they didn't have tomatoes, maybe they didn't have canned beans. They might have used slightly different spices, but some sort of sourdough flatbread, meat, vegetables, with any spices you could get. Yep, that's a taste of the West. A friend of the channel, his name is Guy, sent us the best peanuts I've ever had in my life, roasted straight out of Virginia. Thank you, Guy. All the foods today, the flour for the tortillas, these peanuts, the venison from a friend, the chili recipe from Frank, all of these came through the little community we've built on this channel. I think that's pretty cool. There are so many interesting people out there with great stories, great experiences to share, and a lot of them are in the comments. So I encourage you guys, go down there, read some stories. You can pick up a copy of Frank's hunting adventures and recipe book on our website. I'll put a link in the description, or there's a link right above. And of course you can get a Montana sourdough starter, the exact sourdough that I use. We dehydrated some, and you can get that on our website too. All these flavors today, they are such a taste of the Old West. I hope you get a chance to try them, but if not, it's been fun hanging out in the cabin with you. Cheers, everybody.